Ladies, let's be real. When a relationship is done, it's done. But too often we hold on. We tell ourselves, maybe it's just a phase. Maybe if I try harder, maybe if I just wait a little longer, things will change. But deep down, you already know the truth. So today, I want to talk about the 5 signs that your relationship is over. Because the sooner you recognize them, the sooner you can stop wasting your time and start stepping into the love you truly deserve. When a relationship is thriving, everything flows naturally. Conversations are effortless, laughter comes easily, and there's a sense of emotional safety between both people. But when the connection starts to feel forced, it's as if something is missing, yet you can't quite put your finger on it. You may find yourself trying harder than ever to keep things together, but no matter what you do, it feels like you're the only one putting in the effort. The energy that once existed between you both has shifted. The deep conversations that used to stretch into the late hours of the night are now replaced with awkward silences or surface level exchanges. Inside jokes no longer bring the same kind of laughter. And even when you're in the same room, it feels like you're worlds apart. It's as if something has changed, but neither of you are acknowledging it out loud. There's a constant effort to recreate the moments that once felt so natural. You tell yourself that if you plan the perfect date, send the right text, or say the right thing, maybe the spark will return. But despite your efforts, it still feels like you're walking on eggshells, trying to revive something that just isn't there anymore. The conversations that once felt exciting now feel like small talk. The affection that used to come naturally now feels like an obligation. You begin to notice that you're initiating everything, whether it's spending time together, texting first, or even showing affection. And when you stop putting in all the effort, the relationship feels stagnant. It's almost as if the connection is running on memories rather than genuine emotions in the present. There's a heaviness in your heart because deep down you recognize that something isn't right. Even when you try to communicate your feelings, you're met with dismissiveness, indifference, or avoidance. Instead of addressing the disconnect, the other person may act as if everything is fine, leaving you feeling even more isolated in your emotions. You question whether you're expecting too much, whether you're being unreasonable, or if this is just a phase. But the truth is, relationships should never feel like a constant battle to keep things alive. The most painful part is realizing that the more you chase the connection, the more distant it feels. No matter how much effort you put in, it never quite reaches the level of emotional depth it once had. You want to believe that things will change, but deep down, you know that love should never feel like something you have to force. In the beginning, everything felt exciting. There was laughter, deep conversations, and a sense of emotional security. But over time, something shifted. The happiness that once came so easily started to fade. And in its place, frustration, disappointment, and sadness became more frequent. What used to be an enjoyable connection now feels like an emotional roller coaster, leaving you wondering if this is what love is supposed to feel like. The little things that used to make you smile now barely bring you any joy. You find yourself constantly walking on eggshells trying to avoid unnecessary arguments or tension. You're overthinking every conversation, every interaction, analyzing whether you did something wrong or if the mood will suddenly shift. Instead of feeling at peace in your relationship, you feel emotionally drained. The person who was once a source of happiness now seems to bring more stress than comfort. You start to notice that your energy is lower, your spirit feels heavier, and you spend more time trying to justify why you're staying rather than genuinely enjoying the relationship. The moments of happiness are now few and far between. And even when things seem good for a short while, it's only a matter of time before something disrupts the peace again. The emotional high you once felt is now replaced with uncertainty, and you're constantly questioning whether this relationship is truly meant for you. Instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel exhausted. The relationship takes more from you than it gives, leaving you emotionally depleted. You may find yourself reminiscing about the early days, hoping to recreate those moments, but deep down you know that something fundamental has changed. You're no longer experiencing love in a way that brings joy and peace. You're experiencing love in a way that requires endurance and sacrifice at the expense of your own well-being. Even when you try to ignore your feelings, your body responds in ways you can't control. You feel anxious, irritable, or even emotionally numb. The excitement of seeing them has faded. And instead of looking forward to time together, you sometimes dread it. The emotional connection that once lifted you up now feels like a weight on your shoulders. You tell yourself that every relationship has ups and downs, that maybe you just need to be more patient, but in reality, you're simply trying to convince yourself that what you're feeling isn't real. You hold on to the good moments as proof that things can get better, but those moments no longer outweigh the ones that leave you feeling empty. There was a time when being together felt effortless. The connection was strong, the conversations flowed, and there was an undeniable sense of closeness. But now, even when you're sitting next to each other, it feels like there's a wall between you. The silence is no longer comfortable, it's heavy. The presence that once felt warm and reassuring now feels distant and cold. You find yourself missing the way things used to be. The long talks, the laughter, the feeling of being truly seen and understood. But now it's as if you're in the same space, yet miles apart emotionally. You share a meal, but there's no real conversation. You go out together, but it feels more like an obligation than genuine enjoyment. The intimacy that once connected you both has faded, leaving behind an emptiness that's hard to ignore. When something exciting or upsetting happens, your first instinct used to be to share it, but now you hesitate. You wonder if they'll even listen, if they'll care, or if you're just talking to someone who's physically present but emotionally unavailable. You start keeping things to yourself, not because you want to, but because deep down you feel like they're no longer interested in truly knowing you. You crave emotional closeness, but every attempt to reconnect feels forced. You try to start conversations, but they don't go anywhere. You try to engage, but the energy isn't reciprocated. Instead of feeling like partners, you feel like two people just coexisting. The person who once made you feel safe and understood now feels like a stranger. And no matter how hard you try to hold on, the emotional gap continues to grow. The loneliness creeps in slowly at first. You brush it off, thinking it's just a phase. But then it becomes a pattern. You feel alone, even when you're together. You lay next to them at night, but there's no real closeness. You're in the same room, but it feels like you're in two different worlds. And what hurts the most is realizing that the connection you once cherished is slipping away. And they don't seem to notice, or worse, they notice but don't seem to care. You start questioning whether you're expecting too much, whether you're being too sensitive. But deep down, you know what's missing. Love isn't just about being physically present, it's about being emotionally available. And when that presence fades, the relationship begins to feel like an empty shell of what it used to be. At first, everything seemed fine. The little things that didn't sit right with you were easy to overlook because the good moments felt stronger. You told yourself that nobody is perfect, that love requires patience, and that every relationship has its challenges. But over time, the things you once brushed off became harder to ignore. The behaviors that made you uncomfortable or hurt you started to happen more often, and yet instead of addressing them, you found yourself making excuses. You tell yourself that stress is the reason for the mood swings, that being busy is the reason for the lack of effort, that maybe you're just overthinking things, but deep down, you know the truth. You feel the shift. The energy isn't the same, the love doesn't feel as secure, and yet instead of facing it head on, you try to rationalize it away. You've started explaining their actions to your friends and family, trying to justify why things are the way they are. You downplay your feelings, telling yourself that it's not as bad as it seems. When they cancel plans, you convince yourself they're just tired. When they pull away emotionally, you tell yourself it's just a rough patch. When they say something hurtful, you tell yourself they didn't mean it like that. The pattern continues, and with each excuse, you lose a little bit more of yourself. You silence your own feelings to keep the peace. You start accepting less than you deserve because you believe that love means sacrificing your own needs for the sake of the relationship. But love is not supposed to be something you have to constantly explain away. Instead of listening to your intuition, you keep hoping for change. You think that if you just communicate better, if you just give it time, things will get better. But the truth is, if someone truly values you, they won't put you in a position where you constantly have to justify their actions. They won't make you feel uncertain about where you stand. You've noticed that when you bring up your concerns, they either dismiss them or make you feel like you're the problem for even bringing it up. You start questioning yourself, wondering if you're being too sensitive, too demanding, too much. But the reality is your feelings are valid. If something doesn't feel right, it's because something isn't right. And the more you excuse their behavior, the more you teach yourself to settle for less than what you truly deserve. In the beginning, it was easy to picture a future together. You imagine the milestones, the experiences, and the life you would build side by side. There was excitement about what was to come, a sense of security in knowing that this relationship had direction. But at some point, something shifted. The vision that once felt so clear is now blurry. The certainty you once had has been replaced with doubt. You try to force yourself to hold on to the idea of a future together, but deep down, you don't feel the same way anymore. The plans you used to talk about now feel like empty words with no real intention behind them. When you think about the long term, instead of feeling excitement, you feel hesitation. Instead of looking forward to building a life together, you feel uncertain about whether this is even the right person for you. The conversations about the future have become less frequent, or when they do happen, they feel disconnected. There's no real enthusiasm, no real effort to make plans come to life. You find yourself avoiding discussions about where things are going because deep down you already know that something isn't aligning. The idea of spending years in the same situation, feeling the same doubts, makes you uneasy. You start to notice that when you think about your personal goals, you've been telling yourself that maybe you just need to be more patient, that maybe this uncertainty is just a phase. But deep down, you know the difference between a rough patch and a relationship that has run its course. You recognize that the more you try to convince yourself that the future's still there, the more you feel like you're lying to yourself. And the hardest part isn't admitting that things have changed. It's accepting that the future you once believed in may no longer exist. I know it's hard. I know you may be afraid of starting over, of being alone, of wondering if you'll ever find real love again. But let me tell you, holding on to the wrong relationship will block you from the right one. You are worthy of a love that brings peace, a love that makes you feel valued, a love that feels safe, secure, and effortless. So if these signs are speaking to you, it's time to stop settling. It's time to choose yourself. Because when you do, you make room for the love you truly deserve.